They found the cure. It worked. Then they lost their minds. We are cured. Now we are.
The world did not end with a bang, but with a quiet, sickening dissolution. They called it the Grey Wasting. It was a biological rot that unraveled the very blueprint of life. In the final flickers of civilization, only 3 city-states remained, huddled against the encroaching silence. Human DNA was turning to dust, a genetic collapse that left mothers holding infants who simply faded into ash. It was a tragedy written in the marrow of bones, a silent predator that no wall could keep out, leaving the world a graveyard of unraveling identities. Deep in the scorched dead zones, where the air tasted of copper and dry earth, lived a man who should have been a ghost. His name was Elias. Rumors whispered through the vents of the new citadel like a fever dream. They said a hermit walked through the viral clouds of the wasting as if they were nothing more than morning mist. Elias was a genetic miracle, a living relic of purity humanity had lost centuries ago. His blood was vibrant crimson, a defiant spark in a world turned grey and lifeless. To Commander Valerius, the iron-fisted leader of the new citadel, Elias was not a man with a soul or a history. He was a natural resource, a vein of gold in a mountain of slag. The citadel was dying, its population thinning as the wasting accelerated. Valerius watched the monitors, his eyes cold and calculating. He didn't see a savior, he saw a biological solution. If the citadel was to survive, they needed that blood. They had to harvest the miracle before it vanished into the dust. The hunt was swift and relentless. Valerius dispatched his elite bloodhounds to track him down. They cornered Elias in the skeletal remains of an ancient cathedral, its stained glass shattered and altars covered in the thick ash of the old world. The bloodhounds surrounded him, their heavy breathing echoing in the hollow stone. Elias did not fight or run. He stood calm and mournful amidst the ruins. Before the irons clamped onto his wrists, he looked directly at Valerius through the commander's remote feed. "My blood is too pure for a tainted world, Commander," Elias whispered, his voice like dry leaves scuttling over stone. "It is a fire that does not belong in a house of paper." Valerius only smirked from his command center. He dismissed the warning as the rambling of a coward desperate to save himself. He gave the final order, and the miracle was dragged from the ruins in chains of cold steel. Inside the citadel's sterile labs, the extraction began. The first drop of Elias's blood was a brilliant ruby against the cold grey trays. Technicians worked with trembling hands, processing the genetic anomaly into a concentrated serum. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. The tension was suffocating. A senior council member, skin translucent and grey from the final stages of the wasting, lay on the table, his breath a rattling, desperate struggle for life. The needle plunged in. The effect was a violent, instantaneous rebirth. The grey hue vanished, replaced by a flush of vibrant health. Shriveled muscles surged with impossible density. The man sat up, his movements fluid and powerful, possessing strength far beyond human limits. But as the doctors cheered, his eyes snapped open. They were no longer natural. They were deep, pulsating violet, glowing from within. He tilted his head, his expression vacant yet ecstatic. He claimed he could hear a rhythm, a vibration beneath the floorboards and inside the walls. He called it the music of the cells, a cosmic harmony proving the cure was doing something far more profound than merely healing the sick. The success of the first injection ignited a wildfire of hope across the new citadel. Commander Valerius, witnessing the council members' miraculous rebirth, ordered a city-wide distribution. He envisioned a race of supermen under his command. The serum was a brilliant, glowing violet, a stark contrast to the ash-covered world. Strength surged through the population. The weak became powerful, and the slow became unnervingly fast. It was a brief, intoxicating moment where humanity felt it had finally cheated death. But as the city celebrated, the source was fading. In the high-security labs, Elias was strapped to a chair that served as an industrial altar. Transparent tubes snaked from his veins into spinning centrifuges, harvesting every ounce of his life force. Valerius ignored the medical warnings about the prisoner's deteriorating state. To him, Elias was a well that could not be allowed to run dry until every citizen was fortified. The more they extracted, the more the commander felt a heavy, static tension vibrating in the very stones of the citadel. The first sign of the change was a haunting synchronization. It began in the markets. Groups of laborers would stop simultaneously to wipe their brows, their movements perfectly mirrored. Then came the shared thoughts. A technician would reach for a tool just as a colleague handed it over, neither having spoken. The connectivity was initially perceived as a gift, a heightened empathy that allowed the citadel to function with terrifying efficiency. Individual voices faded into a collective hum. Erratic outbursts of shared emotion, waves of grief or joy rippled through the crowds, leaving people weeping or laughing in unison. Memories were the next to dissolve. The people began to forget their names, their histories, and their families. Their past lives were being overwritten by a singular primal obsession. They no longer looked at their children with love, but with a cold, shared purpose. That purpose was centered entirely on the source. To the citizens, Elias was no longer a man. He was the heartbeat of their collective soul. Every mind in the city was now tethered to his suffering, feeling every needle prick. A massive, silent vigil formed at the base of the laboratory tower. Thousands of violet eyes staring upward in a trance of total, unblinking devotion. The physical cost of the evolution soon became undeniable. The cured were no longer recognizably human. Their limbs began to elongate and their fingers sharpened into points. They no longer needed sleep, standing motionless for days in the flickering neon lights. Food became irrelevant as their metabolisms shifted to a constant gnawing hunger for the genetic purity that had transformed them. They were becoming predators, and their thirst was focused on the one man who held the key to their completion. Valerius watched from his balcony, trembling. He had resisted the serum, but now realized he was a stranger in his own kingdom. His elite soldiers no longer acknowledged his commands. They stood like statues, their violet eyes fixed on the lab. They were no longer an army, they were a pack, and Valerius was merely prey that had not yet realized its status. Inside the lab, a technician approached Elias. "What is happening?" she whispered. Elias turned his head slowly. "My blood is an evolutionary reset button," he replied. "It destroys the self to save the species, building a future where only the collective whole exists. To save the race, it must kill the man." Outside, the silent vigil finally broke. A low, guttural growl rose from the thousands of throats, shaking the foundations of the tower. The cured moved as one, a massive wave of elongated limbs surging toward the gates. They weren't there to rescue their god. They were there to consume him. The hunger had reached a breaking point, and they realized that if they took the source into themselves entirely, the transformation would be final. The steel doors groaned under the pressure of 1,000 clawed hands as the hive mind screamed for its final communion. The heavy steel doors of the laboratory sector finally buckled under the relentless pressure of 1,000 clawed hands. The new citadel, once a bastion of order and the last hope for a dying race, had descended into a nightmare of violet shadows. In the corridors, the few remaining natural humans were hunted like vermin. These predators, once neighbors, moved with a terrifying insect-like grace. They did not speak. They did not need to. Their minds were a single vibrating chord, a hive mind functioning with cold, lethal precision. They cornered the uninfected, their elongated limbs reaching out to find more of the genetic purity they craved from the source. Commander Valerius retreated into the deepest sanctum of the extraction lab, his boots echoing. On the monitors, he watched his elite bloodhounds, now fully transformed, scaling the outer walls of the tower rapidly. Their eyes were glowing beacons of pulsating purple. Valerius clutched his sidearm, a pathetic defense against the tide of evolution he had unleashed. He realized with sickening clarity that Elias was no longer a resource to be guarded, but a beacon that had to be extinguished. To save what was left of his world, he had to kill the source before the hive arrived. He burst into the central chamber, where Elias lay strapped to the extraction rig. The hermit looked like a ghost, his skin translucent. Valerius leveled his pistol at Elias's heart. "You did this," the commander spat, trembling. "You turned them into monsters. You stole their humanity." Elias turned his head slowly, his gaze mournful. "I gave them what you asked for, survival, but the transformation is irreversible. My blood is a signal, and they are the receivers. Even if you kill me, the music will continue to play in their heads, but it will be a song without a singer." Before Valerius could pull the trigger, the reinforced observation glass shattered inward. 3 mutated guards lunged into the room. In a moment of terror, Valerius realized he could not win. He grabbed a discarded syringe of concentrated serum from a nearby tray and jammed the needle into his thigh. The change was instantaneous and violent. Valerius felt his mind shatter. His ego and memories were burned away by a surge of collective consciousness. He saw through 1,000 pairs of eyes at once. He was no longer a leader. He was merely a drop in a vast, cold ocean. He slumped to the floor, his eyes turning a glowing violet. Elias watched the commander's fall. With his last strength, he reached for the emergency chemical purge controls. The extraction had filled the ventilation system with aerosolized DNA markers. If he triggered the purge, a neutralizing agent would flood the city, destroying the biological bridge that connected the hive. It would also kill him. "It is time for the world to be quiet," Elias whispered. He slammed his hand onto the button, ending the cycle of suffering. A thick, white vapor hissed from the vents, neutralizing the violet glow in the air. Across the citadel, the screaming of the hive mind was replaced by a sudden silence. The predators did not die, but they did not move. In the streets, thousands of people became permanent, unblinking statues. They were saved from the gray wasting, but their minds were empty vessels, trapped in a state of eternal catatonia. Elias lay back as the gas filled his lungs. He died looking out at a city of frozen souls. The last man in a world that had evolved into extinction. Days later, the silence was broken by the soft patter of small feet. A child, too young to have been given the serum, wandered into the lab. He stepped over the unmoving form of Valerius and found a single, crystalline drop of Elias's blood glowing on the floor. It pulsated with a soft, rhythmic light, a tiny spark of life waiting in the dark for a new beginning.